cheap labor slave trade network. They pay their workers like $1 a day and a rice ball, and they live 15 of them in some kind of a hut apartment someplace. That's number one. Number two, that isn't even enough. So the second thing they do is then they subsidize the production with federal Chinese government funds. How do they do that? Well, they're a communist country. They can do whatever they want. And oh, by the way, their President Xi is now a communist dictator for life. So this is who we're competing with. A communist dictator for life, a Chi-Com government who enslaves their people, pays them nothing, subsidizes the steel, dumps it in the U.S. It comes over ship, nice and easy now, Port of Los Angeles, dump the steel in. No, there's no tariffs there. No way, come on in. Our manufacturers, they buy it because it's under market pricing. You can't blame them for this. Car companies, they buy it. You want to build a house, you're buying the Chinese steel. You're buying the Chinese aluminum. It's not your fault. You put out bids, and it's a cheaper bid, and so you buy it. And meantime, our steel workers, well, they get put out of work. Our steel industry right now is at 72% of capacity. Aluminum, 39% of capacity. We've lost jobs all over the place. I mean, we got the Department of Defense building tanks, buying it from Chi-Com Steel. You tell me that makes any sense. What happens when we need steel for a submarine and we have no more steel production in the U.S. because the Chi-Com sunk it all? Excuse me, Mr. Dictator, Communist, Enslaver for Life, President Xi, can we have some of your steel, please? I mean, what the hell country does that? It's stupid. But yet the Republicans in the Senate, oh, they don't like it because, well, their money might dry up from their donors. And you might pay another $5 for your $1,000 iPhone 10. We can't have that. Joining us now to sort all this out, Curtis Ellis. Curtis Ellis is a senior, not a junior, a senior policy advisor with America First Policies. Curtis Ellis and I on the Trump train, day one, been there since he came down the escalator. This is our big issue. Tariffs, they're finally coming. It's like a holiday. That's why I'm making March 1st a national holiday myself. The National Steelworkers Day, March 1st. Mark it down. It's going to be a national holiday. It's going to rival Thanksgiving. It's going to be so beautiful. And he's joining us now. He was also on the transition team, part of the Trump campaign in the Department of Labor, negotiating with the slave trade global gangster banksters. And now he's a senior advisor, thank goodness, to America First Policies, where he can come on shows like mine and tell you the truth. Curtis, good to have you.
It is great to be here. It is a great day. John, you have been nailing it. Man, you are on fire, and it is about time. You and I have been fighting this even before fighting for this, even before President Trump was candidate Trump. The very first thing, we were with you at the American Jobs Alliance. We were on the John Fredericks Show. John is now the executive director of the American Jobs Alliance. When it came into existence in 2011, the very first post that we put up on the American Jobs Alliance blog was a headline story of Donald Trump accusing the Chinese of stealing our jobs and cheating on trade. And I remember a lot of people said to me, why do you care what Donald Trump says? And I said, because he is speaking the truth. And
that's right.
John Fredericks said, amen. So I am, it is great. It is just amazing. I am amazed. And not because Donald Trump is doing this, because he always said he would, but I'm just amazed. There was a time I never thought I'd see this. I never thought I'd see an American president standing up and saying the emperor has no clothes.
Yep.
The bipartisan policy of the Washington swamp creatures and the no think tank experts and the bought and paid for academic amen corner all said, oh, China is our friend. And if we give them our jobs and our industries, they will become more prosperous. Then they will become more democratic, and they will become a free market capitalist society. And roses will grow out of my butt. Well, I'll tell you what, roses will grow out of their butts before China becomes a free market, capitalist, liberal democracy like Vermont.
Oh, and by the way, Curtis, their communist enslave the people dictator President Z, you know, the one that went to Mar-a-Lago with his wife and looked really nice and posed for the pictures. Oh, he just changed the Constitution so he could be president for life.
That's right. Chairman Xi, just like Chairman Mao. Now it's Chairman Xi. And they're telling
Chairman
all the
Xi.
companies, all the American companies who fell all over themselves and groveled and kowtowed to the red mandarins, they're now telling all those companies and invested in China, took all the money, the accumulated capital, the accumulated labor of hundreds of thousands of man hours, millions of man hours of American working people. That capital represents the sweat and the toil and the know-how of tens of millions of Americans over 100 years. They take all that know-how, all that accumulated capital, and they invest it in China. And now Chairman Xi, the great helmsman of China, is telling those companies they have to start teaching all their employees Chairman Xi thought. They have to give them the little red book and teach them how to behave according to Chinese principles. Are we surprised? You and I aren't surprised because we know who we're dealing with. But the no think tanks, people like, I don't want to mention any names, but you've got some of the biggest names in the conservative firmament of Washington who have been suckered and bought into the whole China myth that China is our friend. And if we just invest more money and give them more of our trade secrets and let them steal more of our companies and more of our and conduct more industrial espionage, they'll be more of our friend. And they're going to disarm, and they're going to become pacifists like Quakers. And pretty soon, you'll see Chairman Xi on the cover of a Quaker Oats box. I mean, that's how, and it has been proven wrong, and now everybody knows it. Even The Economist magazine, the High Church of Free Trade, says we were wrong on China. And they were wrong on NAFTA. They said if we give NAFTA our automobile industry and open up the borders, there will be no more illegal immigration, and China will become a middle-class society. Why, it'll look like Beverly Hills, or at least like Culver City. Well, no. Now China is a failed narco state. You've got people being slaughtered and decapitated, hanging from highway overpasses. You've got, because all the farmers are out of business because Archer Daniels Midland and Cargill, the people who bought Senator Sassy, are able to dump their corn and their soybeans into the Mexican market and bankrupt the Mexican farmers. They have no choice but to either sell drugs or come north and be landscapers and gardeners for people like Senator Sassy.
Exactly.
I mean, they have failed. They have been wrong, and it has been proven wrong now, time and time and time again. So what more do we need to know? Well,
nothing.
Archer Daniels Midland wants to sell soybeans to China, and all they can tell us is that, well, if we do this tariff thing, what's going to happen is the price of beer will go up because a beer can will cost more. We are very clear here. The lines are very clear. The trade war is not just between China and the U.S. It's between, as you say, the gutless Washington morons and Donald Trump. I was on a radio show last night with Rick Unger and Michael Steele, and they said, well, the price of beer is going to go up because of this. We have made it very clear. China is out to destroy America. And the best argument they can come up with is cheap beer, cheap Coke. I mean, if that's the thinking of these people, they don't deserve to have a country. But we deserve to have a country. They don't deserve to be in office. It is just unbelievable.
Let's go to Senator Mike Lee, Mr. Utah Salt Lake City cruise bot. By the way, Mike Lee, as I've said, Curtis, and you know this, never does a media appearance unless he's selling a book where he can make money. So with Mike Lee, it's all about the amount of money that's coming into his coffers. And he loves being a senator and, you know, running around with his big 50-people staff, and they make sure that he's comfortable and his limo is there. And they open the door for him and they tell him how wonderful he is. This is Mike Lee of Utah Cruise Bot. Mike Lee says that Trump's tariffs, he says, would be a huge job-killing tax hike on consumers. Now, considering that Mike Lee represents one of the biggest steel-making states in the union, Utah, the last I checked, steel industry there, zero. But he does represent it. But he says it's going to be a huge job-killing tax hike. Meantime, we have hundreds of steel and aluminum plants across the Midwest and the Northeast with factory windows shuttered, cardboard and plywood in their windows, and tens of thousands of steel workers out of jobs while they're doing whatever they do in Salt Lake, producing salt or something. This guy is unbelievable. And then he goes on to say, get this. Meantime, this is the same Republican senator that hasn't done anything. This is like the Jerry Seinfeld show, right? Show about nothing. This is a Senate about nothing. He says, while I'm sympathetic to the issues facing domestic steel manufacturers, the hell does that mean? Tens of thousands of people have been put out of work. Oh, I'm sympathetic to the issues facing the domestic steel manufacturers, interpretation, bureaucratic bunko talk. There must be a better way to address the steel industry's concerns. Like maybe we can go have a cup of hot cocoa. And I hope Congress and the executive branch can identify an alternative solution. Like, I don't know, maybe they can make fence posts before these tariffs are finalized next week, because if they do that, my donor money from the slave trade gangster bankster international network dries up and I can't ride in my limo anymore. Can't have that, can we?
Yeah, this Senator Mike Lee is the one who was, when he's asked about, well, he sits on the antitrust, one of the committees that has jurisdiction over monopolies and antitrust activity. They asked him about Google, which owns YouTube, and Google and Facebook censoring conservatives and violating the First Amendment rights of millions of Americans who don't happen to believe in Mark Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt's globalist utopia. Mike Lee says, oh, well, that's not censorship, and that's not a monopoly because, they're private sector and they're allowed to do whatever they want. So he has very selective vision, and that's being kind. I'd say he's blind to reality. He has no credibility. Archer Daniels Midland, Cargill, there's a big agriculture industry in Utah, in Nebraska, all of the farm states, in Kansas, where they do nothing but grow food, grow corn, grow sorghum, grow soybeans. You're going to hear all these people screaming at the top of their lungs that their economies are going to collapse. But you had an advisor to George W. Bush, saying the effect of these tariffs is going to be minimum. It's going to be $12 billion in a $17 trillion economy. This is nothing. What it is, it's a signal to China that we are standing up. Finally, we are recognizing the reality. We're not going to go along with this kabuki theater that China is our friend, and they're going to be just like us one day. Once they get a little richer, they're going to be just like Americans. No. You got to think these farm state senators, they're going back. They want to return to the vision of Thomas Jefferson. His first vision was that America would be a nation of farmers. And I'll tell you what, if we keep going down the road we're going, that's exactly what it is. We will be an agricultural nation because we will be entirely dependent on China and these other countries for our industrial goods. That is the goal of China. And these people are the useful idiots of the Chinese Communist Party and going along with that. And even Thomas Jefferson, though, came around after the War of 1812 when he saw the British burn the White House. He said, we need to have industry in this country if we're going to be really independent. The War of 1812 was called the Second War of Independence, and it was fought over trade.
Tariffs, the original protective tariffs were put in place in the United States in order to stop the Brits from dumping cheap manufactured goods in the U.S. in order to not have factories profitable. Their goal was to keep the U.S. as an agrarian society until the tariffs kicked in. So people don't even know what the history is. Curtis, they're also whining, the do-nothing, feckless weasel Republicans in the Senate and now Congress, Paul Ryan, they're also whining that they weren't given a heads up, that the president didn't consult with them ahead of time, that they didn't have a series of meetings in talking about this. Well, the reason he didn't have it was because he didn't want to deal with their nonsense, crying and screaming like stuck pigs like they are now, because he knows they're beholden to the gangster-bankster international slave trade donor base. That's why he just did this, and he got it over with, and I commend him for this. I commend him for this.
That's right.
That's why I think
right. Look,
March 1st is going to be a holiday.
Yeah, they didn't know it was coming. They weren't given notice. Hello, pick up the Clue phone. There was this thing called a campaign last year. See, they've never encountered a man who actually fulfills his campaign promises. As you rightly pointed out, for 7 years, they've been saying, we're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to repeal Obamacare, when they had absolutely no intention of doing that. Donald Trump ran a campaign, and he said at rallies attended by hundreds of thousands of people, we will put tariffs on China. We will put tariffs on these cheaters, the people who are taking away our jobs and our industries. He said that, and guess what? He's doing that. And all of these idiot members of Congress, they're flabbergasted. You mean, but politicians aren't supposed to do what they say. Yeah, well, President Trump's not a politician. Thank you. So they show their idiocy. Next, you're going to see, mark my words, 10, 9, 8, 7, one of these, very soon you're going to see somebody come out, well, you know, President Trump, Donald Trump, the builder of the Trump Organization, used to buy Chinese steel for its building.
That's coming.
Yeah. Oh, well, that came out during the campaign. The Democrats thought, we've got the magic bullet. We're going to kill the vampire with this one. Yeah, all right. No, we're going to kill the monster with this one. Yeah. Well, you know what that says? It says that this guy is even gutsier. That makes him even better, because even if it hurts his business, he knows what's right. So he knows he had to buy, just like he said, he bought the Chinese steel because it was the low bid.
Yep.
But now that he can do something about it and change the rules so that Americans benefit and the American steel industry has a level playing field to operate on, he's doing it. So on the one hand, the Trump critics are going to say, he's using the tools of government to benefit himself and make himself rich and, get himself a better, increase the value of his personal business empire. And then on the other hand, they say, well, look at that. He even bought Chinese steel himself, and now he's like raising tariffs on Chinese steel, which is going to, I guess, hurt his business empire. Oh, never mind. He's just like a horrible human being.
Well, he's horrible. And, of course, you don't hear a peep from the Democrats here, even those that are in the blue industrial states, because if this was like Bernie Sanders that did this, they'd all be cheering him on. But because it's Trump did it, it really doesn't matter if it's good policy or bad policy. Here's the way the Democrats react. Who did this? Trump. Trump. Bad. We're opposed to it. Doesn't matter what it is, right? So you're not going to get anything from them either. Mike from Chesapeake says, tell Curtis he forgot to mention the Chi-Coms pollute the world in their steel production. So in effect, Trump actually will achieve Kyoto Accords.
That's right. That's the thing. Every environmentalist should be cheering this. Every environmentalist should be cheering Donald Trump, because every environmentalist should be boycotting anything made in China, because they violate every environmental rule. And that's the other thing I was telling these people on the radio last night. Michael Steele, the former RNC chair, and Rick Unger, his liberal punching bag co-host. Look, American Steel has to, A, pay decent wages, pay Social Security tax for all of its employees, pay Medicare tax, pay unemployment insurance into the unemployment insurance fund for every worker, pay property taxes to support the schools and roads and everything else that we take for granted here in America. They have to put smokestack scrubbers on their blast furnaces. They have to not dump their poisons into the river or into your children's bloodstream by pumping it into the air. They have to do all that. China, none of that. None of that. How can an American producer possibly compete with that? Even according to the precepts of Adam Smith, the grand theoretician of the free trade theory. He said, when your domestic producer has a tax imposed on them, and the foreign producer does not have that same tax imposed on them. It is you must put a tariff on the imported goods so as your domestic industry is not at a disadvantage. And so if there were no subsidies and nothing else going on, Donald Trump is exactly right. President Trump is exactly right in opposing the tariff, according to the Bible of Adam Smith. So all these people who are carping and whining and whinging and cringing, they don't know what they're talking about. They're
Absolutely not.
They're just, as you say, sucking up to the money people who have now become lobbyists for China. Let's face it, all these giant corporations are now captured by China, and they are now playing the role of lobbyists for China. And the policies that they are advocating in the United States government are the policies dictated by Chairman Xi.
I got to go. We're out of time. Curtis Ellis, Senior Policy Advisor, America First Policies, the #1 political action committee fighting for the policies and the programs of President Trump every day. Curtis, thank you for being with us. It's been a long time. I never thought I would wake up one day and see a 25% tariff on Chi-Com steel. It's a great day. March 1st is going to be a national holiday.